Good evening, everyone, and it's great to be back. It's going to be great to chat to you all. Tonight we're doing a short alley meetup. We're changing our tone a little bit, just because we're now almost past of Zoom fatigue, and now we're on Zoom reawakening. But we're still keeping it short. Thank you so much for your time. We've got two great speakers this evening, but before we introduce them, I'm going to go through a little bit of background. This is our agenda for this evening. I'm going to give you a super quick welcome. Hopefully you're in the middle of it. Then we've got the first talk from Jeff, the second talk from Shashi, and we're wrapping up at about 8 o'clock. So, as we like to do, we're going to ask, where are you joining us from today? Dave is posting in the chat right now where are you joining us from. If you can take a second to do that. I'm going to hand over to Dave, who's brilliant at welcoming people from all around the world. Do you need to share, Dave?
Please, Rob, yeah. So if I could just share for a second.
There we go.
That'd be great. Yeah. Okay, great. So again, guys, you're very welcome. It was so exciting today. I was looking at the sign-ups, and we had folks from all over Ireland, of course. I saw people from California, some folks I know well in Workday, lots of other places in France and Vienna and loads of other places. So we're just going to ask everyone to pin it to the link there that I posted in the chat. So if you check the Zoom chat, and I'm just going to share my screen then, so just to see where our pins are showing up today. Okay.
We've got Marseille.
Yeah.
Welcome. And Paris. We've got some from the UK. Cambridge. Welcome. I'm seeing all across Ireland, Dave.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
I've got Waterford, someone from New Ross, someone coming in from Cork. I wonder who can be calling in from Kildare. Someone from Longford. We have plenty from Dublin, Wicklow, Donegal,
Berlin. Yeah.
Fantastic.
Welcome. Yeah, I see Barcelona popping up there as well. Brilliant. Okay. So, guys, you're very welcome, no matter where you're joining from. So if you're not familiar with us, we are the Agile Lean Ireland community. So community really being the operative word. We've been going, I think, almost about 6 years now, so quite a while, running meetups, workshops, conferences. I see lots of familiar names there from our recent conference back in October. And you're very welcome to our March meetup. We have two really exciting speakers here today. Two topics we actually have never covered in our 6 years of Ali. So really looking forward to it. Okay, so Rob, I think
you're back, and I just want to give a super shout out to the guys from Overstock and Sligo. Let nobody ever forget about Sligo. It's rule number one. So even though we're running our meetup as a webinar this evening, we do want to have plenty of interaction. You guys have got the chat panel open. That's how we're going to do the Q&A. And work it through that. So myself and Claudia will be working through the Q&A after each of the talks. So just click the button and look at it there. Before we get on to tonight, we just want to give a shout out for our next meetup. In our next meetup, I'll just move this out of my way. We've got implementing OKRs is not the goal with Natalia Hesselo. I hope I pronounced that correctly. And if you're free on April the 29th, please do join us for that. Before we get on, I'd just like to give a big shout out to Prince Harry. So he's started as Chief Impact Officer. We heard this morning. We were straight on the phones. We invited him to a future upcoming Agile meetup, but unfortunately he said he's only prepared to talk about being Prince 2. Not really our interest area right now. Speaking of princes, it is my great pleasure to introduce our first speaker this evening. Our first speaker is Jeff Coyk. Jeff is an associate partner at EY. Before that, he worked with Accenture, JP Morgan Chase, and RBS. Jeff's topic this evening is Team Topologies versus Large-Scale Scrum. He says, and I better not forget this, that he's got a lot of certifications. He's certified in SAFe, LeSS, Scrum, Kanban, and certified Agile leader. Over to you, Jeff, if I can stop the sharing.
Thanks, Rob. I will share my screen.
There we go.
Okay, Rob, can you just confirm you can see my screen?
Yeah.
I'm going to go into presentation mode. Okay, good evening, everybody. My name is Jeff, and it's a real pleasure to be here. As Rob said, I work for EY, and myself and Shashi, it's our great honor to be here this evening speaking with you all. My topic is Team Topologies versus Large-Scale Scrum. It's a lightning talk, so it'll be fast and furious, and we'll do some Q&A after the talk. I'm going to try very hard to keep it to 15 minutes. So a quick view on the agenda. So we need to establish kind of a common language. So I will be explaining what is a feature team from the perspective of Large-Scale Scrum or LeSS. What is a product and how do you go about identifying it? What is cognitive load? The idea that is kind of expanded upon in the Team Topologies book and the Team Topologies method. What does a product look like in a typical investment or retail bank? What are we asking of our people? And then what's a pragmatic alternative? So I had a version of this talk with a gentleman called Ben Maynard, who's kind of a new good friend of mine. And I suppose this is an evolution of my thinking. And I hope Ben is watching there this evening. And I look forward to speaking with Ben on the topic again. But to very quickly introduce myself, I apologize for the pouty picture in the top right of the screen. And I've done this in a sort of an Agile manifesto-y way, that while I see there's value in the things on the right, I tend to favor the things on the left. So I won't drain the slide, but the summary is that, you know, I kind of see myself as a good guy. I see myself as an Agile guy. When I'm coming here to speak about this, it's not to bash a framework. It's not to try to undermine the values and the goals of that framework, but it's simply maybe bringing a pragmatic lens. And for those of you that are in a hurry and can only stay for 5 minutes, this is the punchline. So this is my hypothesis in brief. So my hypothesis is modern financial services companies are complex. The technology that enables them is complicated. So that's a little nod to Cynefin for those of you that are fans of that. They're too complicated for small numbers of small teams to own. This challenges the proposed organization structures that are outlined in Large-Scale Scrum or LeSS. A more pragmatic approach is required. The structures put forward in the Team Topologies book, they work in practice. We apply them all the time. I think we should be realistic with our expectations of our people. I think we should set them up for success. And I think we should try to avoid overloading them and giving them cognitive overload. So to get into a couple of slides, this is an internet meme to begin, and I hope you like it. I think it's quite funny. I think it's also exactly wrong, which is also funny. So I think that makes it ironic, because what the person is posting here is they're trying to get across the sentiment that it's unreasonable for a recruiter to ask for an applicant to have a long list of technology skills. As it happens, I think they picked the wrong set of skills, because this probably is the definition of a full stack developer. But I really like the sentiment of this tweet, which is, you know, you quite typically see recruiters these days asking for long lists of skills, and really it's not possible or probable or reasonable in many cases to expect people to have that set of skills. I want to just quickly dive into LeSS. Okay, so I'm a big fan of the Large-Scale Scrum framework. This is an image that's taken from the site less.works. And I thank Craig Larman and Baz Voda for the image. But just to get into a couple of definitions to make sure we're all talking about the same thing. So first of all, what's a feature team? So LeSS defines a feature team as a long-lived, cross-functional, cross-component team that completes many end-to-end customer features one by one. I love it. It's really clear. The definition is great. The challenge I see is that when this method or framework was developed first, when they talked about cross-component teams, I believe the emphasis was on avoiding things like a separate DBA team or a separate sysadmin team, and that instead you would want a small group of people that could do all of the change that was required for a given application. But what we see with our financial services clients is actually when you talk about products, you don't just have to go cross-component, you also have to go cross-application, and in some cases across many applications. The next slide, also taken from LeSS, asks about, well, what do we mean by product? Okay, so a product, and to get to your product definition, LeSS talks about they aim for broader product definitions. And to do that, and to get there, you have to ask a set of broadening questions. You have to identify who are the end customers, what do they consider the product to be, what's the original problem and what's that trying to solve. And then from there, to maybe narrow in on your first iteration of your product, you would ask a set of narrowing questions. The challenge that I see with broad product definitions is that they increase the cognitive load for those working within the product. So a broad product definition is excellent at eradicating dependencies, which is a good thing, but it also introduces this complexity, and that's a trade-off. Let's talk about what we mean by cognitive load. So for those of you that have not read the book, I would recommend it. I have it here beside me. I use it quite frequently, if I'm being honest. The book defines cognitive load as the limit that any one person has on the amount of information they can hold in their brain at any given moment. So if you want to think about it from a technology perspective, that's maybe the equivalent of random access memory. That was originally defined by John Sweller back in the 80s or 90s as the total amount of mental effort being used in the working memory. So that's what cognitive load is and what it's all about. And there's three particular types of cognitive load that are explained: intrinsic, extraneous, and germane. I've come up with a simple illustration of each. So intrinsic is, the example I've got is, oh my goodness, COBOL is quite different to Java, isn't it? So that's something fundamental, maybe something tacit that you need to build up over time. So it's a fundamental set of skills related to a technology or a language or a framework or a tool. Extraneous is the second type, and that's more about the context and about the domain. So that's something like, well, why does this test environment behave differently to that one? And the third type is germane, and this is probably deeper into the actual domain. So the example I give is that Indian bonds are really complicated, aren't they? And if you see that when you add up the three different types of cognitive load, it can actually be quite challenging to bear all of those things. I want to talk about what a product might look like within an investment bank or a retail bank, and I'll do the whistle-stop version of this. I worked in a large US investment bank, and we worked in securities. So securities, for those that are interested, are equities or stocks or bonds or repurchase agreements. The product doesn't really matter. What I'm trying to show in this slide is the scale of complexity in a financial services organization when you take a broad product definition. So first of all, within your product, you would have sales and trading applications. And these are different ways to capture the trades. And they might be different, built on different technologies. They might be of varying complexity. And you might have different instances of this for a given jurisdiction. Once the trades are captured, they need to be processed. And in the investment bank where I worked, there's something here that's called a core processing app. This is maybe updating positions. This is maybe generating confirmations. But this is, right at the core of what it is that you're doing. If this was drawn to scale, this would be a bigger box. In the investment bank where I worked, there were 16 versions of this, 16 different versions that existed through mergers and acquisitions. On one of the 16 where I worked, there were over 100 engineers working on this product. And the product was complicated. We're talking about millions of lines of code, several different components, several different technologies, an Exadata appliance, something really, really tricky. And that was one of 16. So if you were to gather up all of the engineers that support just this one little box at that one investment bank, you would probably fill a large auditorium. But that's not the scale of the product. The product goes on. So you would also have to capture finance and accounting events for the product. You would also have to risk manage the trades for the product. You would also have a set of enterprise reference data applications. and you would probably have a set of analytics applications. And if you add up all of the complexity within all of these applications, you're getting to tens and tens of millions of lines of code. You're getting to tens of technologies. You're getting to a whole different set of specialist skills, perhaps deep domain skills, data skills, security skills, and it's just an awful lot of cognitive load to ask people to try to carry. The other concept that I struggle with a little when it comes to broad product definitions is that across the bottom, maybe everything from this amber set all the way around here, all the way down to the bottom, these are probably to some degree enterprise applications. So they're not owned by the securities stack, they're actually shared. And I think this is sometimes called the cake and candles problem. But the idea of drawing a product definition around all of this will cause challenges for other products that plan to use these enterprise applications. So again, another challenge that I see with implementing the broad product definition as prescribed by LeSS. So fundamentally, I think we're asking too much of people to expect them to be able to bear that level of cognitive load. So what's a pragmatic alternative? Well, I really like what's outlined in the Team Topologies book. Okay, the Team Topologies book talks about exactly 4 different types of teams, and you can configure these teams dynamically, almost like little building blocks, Lego blocks or Tetris blocks or whatever analogy you want to achieve the outcomes that you want to get to. So what are the 4 types of teams? So the first is a stream aligned team. So that's aligned to the flow of work. You can consider that your Scrum team or your squad or your feature team, but they are effectively aligned to the business domain and they're writing the valuable features. The second is an enabling team. So an enabling team helps the stream aligned team to overcome obstacles and they detect missing capabilities. It's sometimes called a look ahead team or a team that's looking around the corner. And I sometimes think of that analogy of the square wheels. You know, they're the people that come along with the round wheel when the stream aligned team is too busy to be thinking about you know, more efficient or maybe more innovative ways of doing things. The third type of team is the complicated subsystem team. And that's where you might have significant calculations, technical expertise, perhaps that's deep mainframe or some legacy technology. And the idea is that you just have a team of specialists focusing on that special thing. And the fourth type of team is a platform team. And that is, as you would guess, a team that tries to abstract the other teams away from the complexity of the underlying platform. So that could be everything to do with environments, infrastructure, automation, tooling, and perhaps putting some guardrails such that the stream aligned team can focus on real business value. And we probably see that, I know, David, at your company as well, right? That's probably a common attribute in some SaaS product companies. So the last thing to say on the 4 fundamental topologies is that you know, the flow of work goes from left to right. The teams operate in a eat your own dog food kind of a pattern. So if they write the code, they run it. There's no handoffs between the teams. You know, this is dynamic. So teams come and go and relationships change as the demands of the work change. So I would say it's a relatively dynamic organization, but you can see it's built up of those exact team types. And then how do the teams interact? Well, the method defines exactly 3 different interaction modes. So the first is collaboration. Okay, so collaboration is where teams are working together for a defined period of time to discover something new. That could be new technologies, APIs, new practices. The second type of interaction is X as a service or everything as a service, and where one team is providing a set of services to another team that is consuming that set of services. And the third type of interaction mode is facilitation. And that's effectively where one team is helping or mentoring another team. And I think there's quite a lot of definition actually and quite a lot of guidance around each of these interaction modes. And for me, it's just really fundamental, really simple. You've got clearly defined patterns, you've got clearly defined purposes for teams, clearly defined interaction modes. And I think it's a sensible way of overcoming the cognitive load challenges that I outlined in the previous slides. I'm not going to do Ben justice, right? And for those of you that have come across the term straw man, the straw man is where you put together a very weak version of someone else's argument. Ben put together a very strong version of an argument to me, so I will apologize up front for paraphrasing. But Ben's primary concerns were around that the Team Topologies ideas could limit organization ambition, and that the LeSS framework is really challenging organizations. And the danger is if we say, okay, just apply team topologies or just apply SAFe, that actually you're limiting the organization ambition. And the second objection that Ben put forward was probably at the individual level, that if you constrain an individual and say, well, you just look after that particular value stream, that particular technology, that perhaps we're taking away opportunities for those individuals to grow. And the third point that Ben was making was that my own experience with working with LeSS in a large US investment bank, that actually the framework has moved on since then. And that now, particularly with less huge, there's a focus on being more evolutionary and incremental in your implementations. I think all of these things are valid points. And I think Ben did a really good job when we discussed this back last November. My own thinking has moved on quite a bit since then. And Ben has actually really helped me with that thinking. And Ben has been providing training and coaching to our EY team as well, which has been very useful. I think at this point, what I would say is the risks of asking too much of our people probably outweigh the benefits that are described on this slide. And as I said, I will apologize for paraphrasing and straw manning what is indeed a very good argument from Ben. So to finish, I'm just 30 seconds over. I apologize for that. I would like us to be kind to our people. And I would like us to be reasonable in our expectations of our people. And with that, I will stop. And we'll open it up for some Q&A. Thank you for the opportunity.
That was excellent. Thank you very much, Jeff. If you have any questions for Jeff, please do add them to the Q&A section now. Jeff, that was really interesting. So I was most interested in Ben's critique of the team topologies. I am a fan of it. I don't know if you can see with my background, but that, since it's beside you, I just wanted to show off a bit. It's close enough to me too. But the Ben's criticism I haven't seen before. You were saying that you've moved on from that straw man. Is there any big areas that you think you challenge those three things on?
Yeah, so Rob, you're a little bit low. I think your question to me was, how do I think my thinking has moved on since that conversation with Ben?
That's right.
Yeah, so I think the conversation with Ben really helped to challenge me, okay? I think my initial work probably 10 years ago in a US investment bank was probably where Ben's thinking is now, right? Which is actually, I was very theory Y. I was very, management 3.0, point people at a challenge and give them what they need and they'll solve any problem. I think my own personal experience over the last few years has been working in heavily outsourced, heavily offshored teams, where perhaps the average capability of the average developer within a team is probably slightly lower than and slightly maybe not as mature as what I'd seen in the US investment bank. So I almost feel like my own thinking had kind of constrained itself based on that. So I was trying to come up with ways to treat the symptoms rather than treat the causes. I think Ben has challenged me on that. And Ben has said, Jeff, listen, there is a real opportunity here for people, that when you talk about intrinsic motivation for people, that, you should be, and it kind of comes back to the Marty Kagan talk that he gave at the ALI conference, right? That you should be giving teams problems, not solutions. And I think, I'm probably just somewhere in the middle now to answer your question, Rob. I'm probably, I want to give people opportunities. We believe in learning. The organization where I work at the moment, it's a big learning organization in EY. We're challenging everybody to get their tech MBAs, which we're funding through Hult University. Like we're big on learning. I've probably just shifted the dial a couple of points back towards that direction, and I still want to make sure that we protect our people.
Very good, thanks. We have a question in from Anna, Jeff. What are the expectations from leaders in terms of implementation frameworks? Everyone wants a Spotify model.
Yeah, that's a good question, actually. Ben and I talked quite a bit about should organizations implement less or should they adopt less practices? And I think Ben is quite realistic in his advice to organizations now about the implementation of less. That they should try it and they should be clear on their motivations and they should pilot it in a particular area and test and learn and grow from there. I think that's really good advice. And I think there's ways of doing that bottom up and I think there's ways of doing that top down. Each requires a different level of leadership sponsorship. In terms of implementing the Team Topologies patterns, I've actually seen that they can be done, maybe not quite through skunkworks, but you can do things in the small, and you can pilot things relatively easily as well. So I think when it comes to agile transformation generally, I am a believer that it's great to have a sponsor. I'm also in the camp that says ask for forgiveness, not for permission. So I think there's a lot of value that can be proven just by get going and do something useful, and then use your empirical evidence to justify further investment.
Fantastic. Some of the questions we've got coming in, Jeff, they're related to this, looking around facilitation. When is that facilitating collaboration useful?
The question is, when is the facilitation mode useful?
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, so I think it's when a team is perhaps requiring some mentoring, when a team is perhaps requiring some coaching. Maybe you've got a team or a set of experts that are, particularly experienced in a certain technology or a certain application or a certain domain. So it's those use cases of really supporting, mentoring, coaching, training, teaching. Whenever you see that, that's when that interaction mode would be most useful. But again, I'd say like the Team Topologies book is a very accessible book. I would encourage people, go and get it, and you'll flick through it over the course of a weekend. And it's the type of book that you can just dip in and ask those questions, and it's you don't need somebody like me to explain it to you. Just go and get it.
Fantastic. It is very good to get you to explain it to us, though. So I'm going to ask a question for Danica. How can we encourage team members to develop a team-first mindset?
Oh, I think I know Danica. She's a friend and colleague. Perhaps incentives would be the first place to go. So as a general rule, I believe people behave how they are incentivized to behave. And I think so long as organizations incentivize individuals, then you will have people that optimize for individual behavior. I think the more that you can incentivize for team type behaviors, then the more likely people are to behave as teams. And there's probably, there's carrot and stick approaches to all of these problems. When I worked at a US investment bank, we did some excellent team-based incentive stuff, and it genuinely created more team-based, team-first behaviors, if you want to consider it that. I think with everything, though, you can just shift the dysfunction to the next level. So what I've seen is that rather than individuals kind of vying for promotion or vying for a pay rise, what you have instead is the squad or the team that's trying to outperform the other squads or teams. So, I think you need to be careful that you don't just shift the problem to the next level of the organization. Actually, when it comes to money, for example, we would have a great phrase that says you pay people enough to take money off the table, right? Money is actually a disincentive rather than an incentive. So you just need to identify, focus on kindness, I suppose, focus on integrity, focus on respect for the individual, and try to incentivize some team type behaviors. Thanks for the question, Danica. That was a tough one.
Excellent. We've got one question left in there and another in the chat, but our time is against us, Jeff. So I'd like to give Jeff a huge shout out and thank you so much for your time this evening. With that, I'm going to pass over to Claudia.
Thank you, Rob. Thank you, Jeff. Yes, our next speaker, Shashi Sopirala. Shashi is an independent consultant currently placed in EY. He's certified enterprise agile coach who is helping individuals, teams, organizations in their agile journey. And today he will speak about systemic coaching. Shashi, please share the screen.
Thank you, Claudia and Agile Lean Ireland. Thank you so much, and it's an honor to be here. And Jeff, that was a fantastic presentation and insights. Let me share my screen here. Could you see, can you confirm please? Are you able to see the screen?
Yes, we can see your screen.
Okay, so let me start off. My topic today is systemic coaching. Let me move on to the next slide here. So the agenda I'm going to talk about, I'll briefly introduce myself and I'll talk about a cautionary tale. And if you're anywhere, you're touch based on system thinking, you'd obviously have heard this tale, but apologies for the repetition. And I'll be talking about some systemic challenges that has been existing in the industry for a long time. And I will look at the systems from an iceberg lens, and we'll talk about what are areas are there and how we want to do the systemic moving forward from a coaching. And then moving on to the real topic of the day, I have a couple of slides around what is systemic coaching and the coaching strategy, and I'll take some feedback at the end. Okay, moving on to about me. My mission is to respect, listen, and support, encourage, inspire, and motivate people. The focus is people. I believe that when you kick off any transformation, it's important the transformation is focused on people rather than the technology, the tools, whatever fancy ways you want to do that. Yeah, it's more of the people transformation that's important is my focus. And you can open up their minds and you can open up their thought process to achieve the results they want to achieve, and that actually contributes to the overall organization. And from a vision point of view, I want to enable the organizations and people to have a clear direction and focus on achieve quantifiable success in their roles or in their organizational targets they want to meet. And it's a continuous learning development environment people and organizations should be in order to achieve their results. And the kind of mindset I bring towards this is, as I said earlier, it's about focusing on the people. People transformation is key. As a coach, I work with people. I open up their minds. I open up the possibilities, what they can do, what they cannot do, and what are the challenges they face. And then the answers are in their minds and their experience. And I help the coachee find the solution in a way that way they are able to find and not continuously hand over solutions through their discussions. And through this process, I facilitate productive conversations. And I don't need to know what the coachee wants, what is his agenda, or I don't need to know, but I am always here to have a reflection board, have difficult conversations that stimulate the coachee imagination. And as a coach, I'm here to have a reflection of the coachee thought process and work with me. On the experience point of view, I am a certified enterprise agile coach working right now with Jeff and the team in EY, and I started with them in January 2021. 23 years of experience. I worked with Verizon, Bank of America. I did some tremendous work in agile transformation with Verizon, and recently with the Bank of America and Financial Services, which is a well-known company, and identity access management, telecommunications, product development landscape. So there is an element of what I've learned through this journey as an working with the different technology groups, different roles. And also right now I have started a company called Ajira Consulting, Ajira meaning agile in Sanskrit, and offering independent coaching services, offering transformation services, delivering agile transformation, and to and work with number of cohorts globally. I have South African cohorts, US cohorts, where I work with major leaders in coaching environment to create better working environments, to identify what is the best way to do, how do we coach, how do we create leaders who are coaches. And my interest, I'm quite an outdoor person. I have done skydiving, Mount Kilimanjaro. I ran 100 miles in a 28-day cycle. I cycle for Majorcan Mountains every year. I've climbed the highest mountains in Ireland, and I do a lot of charity work with the Diabetes Ireland, Cerebral Palsy Ireland, and Oxfam Ireland. So that's me in a nutshell. And if you need more information about me, please do contact me outside of this call. And moving to today's system coaching, let me start with talking about systemic thinking. So I have a small tale or a story, whatever you want to call that. So there was a spread of malaria in 1950 in a small island called Borneo. And so Borneo management called to WHO and said, can you help us? And WHO decided, let's spray DDT. So that's the decision they made to eradicate malaria by killing the mosquitoes. By killing the mosquitoes, which were actually feeding on the people, creating the malaria around that. That DDT also killed parasitic wasps in the island. So that contributed to caterpillar larvae, which they used to feed before start to flourish. And then as the caterpillar started to flourish, people started to see that their thatch roofs started to fall because the caterpillar flourishing has caused the caterpillar to eat on the thatch roofs of the houses. Other consequence of the DDT was consumed by flies, and the geckos on the island started to eat the flies which are dead, consumed by DDT. But geckos survived the DDT, but passed the DDT, and the cats in the island started to eat geckos and start to die. When the cats start to die, there is an influx of growth of rats, and which started to spread plague in the island. So, and in order to reverse the system, WHO decides and requests the Royal Air Force from UK to drop thousands of cats. I think, if I remember the number, it's 14,000 cats dropped through a parachute into the island in order to help spread, kill the rats. So if you look at this, we sometimes we ignore and don't understand the interrelatedness of things. We often have a solution at looking at the small event, and then we start to address that problem with a small solution. But we don't understand the interrelatedness of what happens if I do this. What is the impact on other situations around, other parts of the situation around. And sometimes simple questions, simple problems require complex and reflective thinking. And it's found that it's managed by design is important rather than managed by default, not understanding the whole systemic view of the problem. As Hofkirchner and Roche said, the crises we face are systemic in nature. To overcome these crises, we need to understand how systems work. To arrive at such an understanding, we need to think systemically. And another great speaker, Russell Hakoff, is my favorite. I follow him all the time. And the performance of a system depends on how its parts work together and not on how they operate in isolation. So that's keeping that context into our discussion today. I'll move to the next slide. And these are the system challenges. If you are aware of Professor Peter Hawkins, who has done a great deal of work in systemic coaching. He was a professor at Henley Business School, and he ran a survey with C-level executives in 2017 to understand what is the biggest challenges in their organizations. And if you look at closely these challenges that came out as a common pattern across this research, unceasing and accelerating transformation, the technological and digital revolution, de-intermediation and Uberization, the need to learn and adapt faster, the hollowing out of organizations and growing complexity of the stakeholder world, globalization, climate change. If you look at each of these and closely observe, they're all interconnected in some way or some form. And sometimes that interconnectedness could be an opportunity, and sometimes it could be a threat by itself. So if from a systems point of view, if we start to address one challenge, we are losing out the focus on other challenges. So it's important to address challenges as a system together and work through them. Moving to the next slide, yeah, I tried to examine and the systems in an iceberg lens. I actually wanted to use an integral model here, but I decided to do the iceberg model. Yeah, before I jump into the iceberg model, let me define what system is. The system is interconnecting parts functioning as a whole. Change the take away pieces or add more pieces. If you cut the system in half, you don't get two smaller systems, but a damaged system that will not function properly. The arrangement of pieces is crucial. It's exactly like a jigsaw puzzle. You need to put things in perspective. But in a system, sometimes you get to have done some experimentation to arrange those pieces in order to function properly. The parts are connected and work together. And its behaviors depends on total structure. And that is why a lot of experts call out that change the structure and you will see the behavioral changes in an organization or a system. So if you jump into the iceberg model and if you look into deeper, a majority of the organizations I've been with, they always try to address the events that are happening in the organization, which is what you see on the top level of an iceberg. we are always addressing with the problems like introducing tools in a transformation as the major agenda for agile transformation, introducing different changes of team structure, but you're still keeping the same mindset. You're not changing there. But if you take a deeper look and start to look at the patterns and trends that are causing these events, then you're, as an organization, as a system, you are starting to anticipate why these events are occurring. How do we go solve these at a different level? And then if you go deeper into that iceberg, you start to see the structure. And once you start to the structure and what is that causing these patterns, trends, and events, you start to see how do we design our system or our organization in a way that we don't have to put a lot of emphasis on the events. We will focus on how to, underlying structures can be changed in order to avoid these events and patterns and trends. And if you're keen and more deeper into mental models, and that is where the actual real transformation happens. That is where the mindset kicks in. That is where a system is starting to see a drastic transformation, that you are seeing less number of events coming through. The patterns have changed, the structure has changed, and that is where the transformative thinking and that is where innovation, the real innovation happens, and system thinking is essential to this journey. Moving to the next one, this is systemic coaching. What is it? Yeah, systemic coaching is a systemic guided self-reflection by a coach to consider the system's connection from different perspectives. The goal of coaching is defined by the client himself. That's the coaching. And when I say coach or a coaching aspect, people start immediately think this is something we need to bring external coaches. Probably we need external coaches to start with. But the whole idea of coaching is to create that leadership in the organization as the coaches. That is where the systemic coaching starts to kick in, and you're moving away from the control management style, and you're looking at more as a coach for the organization. You're working as a coach mindset. And in my coaching sessions, when I talk to my clients, I ask some real difficult questions. I ask some crazy perspectives. We create some hypothesis, experimentation. We discuss different ideas, different solutions in order to solve what coach is trying to solve. And as a coach, I will very seldomly offer that perspective of how do you solve a problem. I'm not here to, as a coach, to provide those solutions. As a coach, I'm here to open up the minds of the coachee and talk to the coaches and reflect on their thinking, ask their difficult questions, and then start to open up their possibilities. And every individual has a relationship with self and his environment in different roles. And that is important part of a coaching session. The coaching is more about, in a system, is focused on the people. That is why I say it's important. The people have to change in a system in order for the system to change. Interactions create systems that strive for stability. It's always, as we live in a complex adaptive systems, which are at a constant movement, constant change is happening. It's important that in a relationship changes in a system, a change or the equilibrium starts to change and it's disturbed. The disturbance sometimes can trigger further interdependencies, which become more complex. You are making a system more complex, and as we go back to the Borneo tale, the reversing of system becomes too complex, too expensive. And it's important that there are conflicting goals within a system, which in turn have to have different kinds of influencing factors for decisions. So the systemic coaching perspective is not about evaluation of disturbances or positive or negative way or to judge the system, but only to bring out the best in the system and the basic understanding, the interactions, the connections of the system. These interdependencies become clear through systemic thinking and systemic coaching. And again, I'll contradict myself here. There are a number of scientific system theories, hypotheses that sometimes may not make sense when you look at and read them. And I have seen in my career practicing coach for the last 10 years, people think this is all theory, but I've seen tremendous results working when you apply these theories, apply these hypotheses into a system. So system coaching enables the importance to recognize the need for the empathy to relate and understand humans. And again, this emphasis is on people. It's not about the process. It's not about the tools you introduce to make things better. We need to make people better in order to make a system better. And humans have emotionally, cognitively, somatically, and ontologically with their individual and collective perceptions. And these create great value and beliefs between the people. And connecting these people is important. And the way we treat one another individually, collectively is also critical for any system to survive. And looking at the principles of coaching, what we do is here, focus on the connections as and not as separate parts. When you coach a system, you coach it, you don't coach specific team or individual. You coach as a systemic way where how many teams are working on a program, how many people are working on it. You work with individuals at the team level, at the program level, at the organizational level. Understanding how all systems are nested within larger systems. See systems in relation to other systems. We are part of and affect all systems we observe and engage with. We cannot be completely objective as we bring our own culture, values, biases into a system. So it's very hard to sometimes to be completely objective. It's not about what we focus on, but also about how we focus and from where we focus is critical in a system's view. And requires system perceiving, system thinking, system being, and system relating. Claudia, sorry, I may be running late, but I have this last slide here. Okay, and system coaching strategy is important for any system and any organization working and creating that environment for people. It's important to create a coaching strategy, and coaching strategy is important because you have a coaching strategy built into organizational fabric and making sure you have alignment with the system's culture, and also coaching as an infrastructure to grow the teams to deliver their dreams and deliver their thought process into what they want to achieve. I want to introduce something called entropy here. Yeah? Entropy is fundamentally a probabilistic idea for every possible usefully ordered state of molecules. There are many more disordered states. And just as energy tends towards a less useful, more disordered state, so do businesses and organizations in general. Rearranging these molecules or business systems and people into ordered state requires an injection of outside energy. And I believe that is where systemic coaching allows organizations to reflect on disordered states to create a coaching culture as a fabric of the organizational transformation. Coaching strategy has to be firmly grounded in the organization's purpose and mission. Its strategy, its development plans, its people development policy that needs to engage people to be communicated. So I close here with a key takeaway to think about. And it's important we start to think this way as a system. Everything is interconnected. Hence, what happens in one part of the system affects another. Cause and effect is not linear, one-directional process. It is much more iterative. System context matters a lot. If you want to bring any change, if you want to introduce any frameworks, it's important what this system is trying to solve. What is the context they want to use? Take a larger view and a new perspective will emerge. And we can illuminate the new understandings, the new possibilities of the system. So systemic coaching brings a framework that and an approach for exploring hidden dynamics, clarifying the resolving different types of leadership teams, organizational issues. When we fully understand different systems that surround us, we can uncover new opportunities. That said, Claudia, I think I'm finished now. Thank you. Thank you so much again.
Thank you so much for your talk. We still have, oh yeah, Rob, you muted, but yeah. We still have a few minutes for questions. But maybe before we go to questions, do you have any examples, Shashi, for us, how we can use it really in our, day-to-day work?
I knew somebody would ask this question because I don't want to leave it at 10,000 feet high. So I just, as a coaching cohort, we worked with certain organizations and we developed a playbook. Yeah. So I put it a playbook and how we use it as a coach. How do we bring it? If you have time, I can talk 2 minutes about that as well. So There's always a pressure internally or externally from the organization to change. The change is required in an organization, and there's a pressure that, oh, we want to do agile transformation, we want to do digital transformation. And as a coach, what we do is we work with the top leadership and discuss what is that outcome expected, what is the context, what are they asking the coach to help with. Because the coaches in a group, if you ask any coach, it's an invitation only process. You need to invite a coach to work with the leadership team, and coach start to look at the working ways of working of the organization, the capability processes, the structures, and then you start to create a diagnostic of how the system's working right now. What is the current picture of the system? And you create that understanding of where the system wants to be, where the leadership wants to see the system to be or the organization to be. And you start to create and work and start to see some action research going on. And you test the experiment. Once that small experiment starts to work, we feed back to the leadership, and leadership starts to look at their structure, and they create that changes in the structure, and that starts to dig into the cultural change. And it's not something, transformation doesn't happen in a 6-month cycle, and it's not a project that you go in there and say, I have 6 months time, you need to change that. The change is a constant. And if you look at the exit strategy, I don't want to take more time here. If you look at the exit strategy, the goal of an external coach is to create managers or the leaders in the organization as the coaches. So as we work with the internal organization as a coach, you create the change. That is the exit criteria for any coach. I hope I answered your question, Claudia.
Is there any difference between system coaching and a typical coaching?
There is, yeah. So system coaching is you're looking at a bigger picture. And if you look at a team coaching or individual coaching, it is more focused on a certain small group of people in a team, or you're looking at the individual coaching. But when it comes to system coaching, we talk about collectiveness. We talk about the collective power of the organization. We look at different aspects of the system. And and in my recent engagement, there was a big change happening for 24 months. And we could see how you change certain small things with the feedback loops from the teams. And again, if you're changing the system, there's a system coaching aspect happening, and same time, the coaching of individuals and the teams needs to happen at the same time. It is all hierarchical. You need to work through the process.
Okay, thank you, Shashi. There's also one question, I think, both for you and Jeff. What do you think will happen next to enable large agile at scale to factor in people's cognitive ability to operate within it? And yeah.
Can you repeat that?
What do you think will happen next to enable large agile at scale to factor in people's cognitive ability to operate within it?
Perhaps, Shashi.
Go ahead, Jeff. Go ahead.
I'll go first, perhaps, and then I'll pass to you.
Yeah.
So thanks for the question, Andy. It's a very good one. If I look down the road 20 years from now, there is a possibility that we'll all be Elon Musk and the Neuralink team will have augmented our brains with technology. So perhaps cognitive load at that point won't be such an issue, because a little bit like the Matrix, if we want to learn how to fly a helicopter, we'll just learn how to fly a helicopter. But until that time, I think there's probably that balance that I tried to explain, which is creating an environment where people are challenged to learn, but not overloading them. That's sometimes described as the zone of proximal development, or being in the zone. So you want to be constantly challenging people to move out of their comfort zone, trying new things, creating psychological safety, and enabling them to grow in that way, enabling them to experiment, enabling them to fail, and rewarding them for that learning. That would be my answer. Shashi, what would you say?
Yeah, exactly. I completely agree. And what you said, Jeff, I'll just add there is, we right now, we measure performance in a different way. And we want to work as a team, but we start to measure them individually for their performance teams. And the important thing to change is we start to measure collectively. We start to measure what is happening as a team, what is this team delivering, how is this team working, and then that cognitivity limits the work in progress and enables the teams to be more L&D, the learning and development aspect happening. Let them fail, and as a team they fail, as a team they success. It's a change that is coming slowly. I've seen some organizations starting to see this change kicking in, and especially in financial services. I don't want to quote an example right now, but I can see that is kicking in. The budgets are being planned in a different way. We are seeing that change happening slowly, Claudia.
Thank you, guys. Rob?
I thank you very much to our fantastic speakers this evening. There's thank yous coming in from on the chat, and we applaud them too. Dave has a link that you go right now to give us some feedback, if you wouldn't mind, over the next 2 or 3 minutes. If there's any last questions for the guys, we do have another minute or two. Otherwise,
oh yeah, we do have
Oh, we do. Go ahead. Fire ahead.
How do we motivate people, teams, to thank them when the larger organization has not had the Agile incorporated as yet?
Yeah, I'm happy to take that. Thanks, Sharon, for the question. Yeah, I would say, be the change you want to see, or whatever cheesy phrase you want to use like that. Back to my point about asking for forgiveness, not for permission. There's another phrase that says culture is 80-90% local, and actually the way you can have little pockets within organizations that almost have their own microculture. So if you want to create that environment where people feel rewarded and safe, then why don't you just go ahead and do it? And there's lots of small scale ways to do that. And sure, there will probably still be some big systemic challenges in the organization, but there's nothing like just getting started. And in our company, we have a thing which we use, which is like an appreciations wall, a recognition wall. Appreciation is one of the most powerful emotions that exists. It doesn't cost anything, takes almost no time. So why not start there? Put a reminder in your calendar, appreciate someone once a week, and start to spread the love around. That's where I'd start. Shashi?
Yeah, I will also go a bit cheesy, because I always think one quote, Jeff, we want to be intelligent in an environment. Yeah, we want to be intelligent, but if we start to apply intelligence to everything, sometimes it's become like a scalpel or a knife that's in your hand. It starts to cut things too much. We start to dissect it too much. Sometimes you have to let it happen, let the change come in, the transformation. You have to allow that to happen. Sometimes there is no logic of why you do certain things. It's important not to apply intelligence to everything we are doing. We are humans, end of the day. Sometimes the things roll as they need to happen. If that makes sense. That's something I want to leave to think about. Yeah, because I always think, so if you apply too much of intelligence to anything, and you start to create a chaos. You start to create, is it right, wrong? You start to ask questions. Sometimes that's you should stop that. You should draw a line and say, yeah, I think this is something we should do because my common sense tells me to do it. And you can drive that through theoretical models. You can drive that to some experience. You can build all that capabilities into that.
Thank you so much both for that. We're just coming at time. Thanks everyone for your time. I see that there's people starting to drop off, and please do join us on the 29th of April for our next talk. Thanks everyone.
Thank you so much. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks again, guys. Great talks.